All right, so if you're just starting out in psychology, you are about to meet one of the most powerful tools in our entire toolkit, hypothesis testing. It's how we go from having a curious question to a conclusion we can actually stand behind with data. So let's dive right in.
Think about a question like this. The stakes are incredibly high, right? We can't just guess. We need a solid, reliable way to figure out if something, like a new therapy, is truly making a difference, or if what we're seeing is just random noise. And that is exactly what hypothesis testing helps us do.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture question, then I'll walk you through the 5-step compass that guides pretty much every study. We'll look at a key decision researchers have to make, decode what significant actually means, and then wrap up by getting you ready to think like a researcher.
So let's get into it. How do we make confident decisions about a huge group of people when we can only study a small piece of that group? That is the fundamental problem that hypothesis testing solves.
Here's the core idea in a nutshell. Look, it's totally impossible to test every single person with depression to see if a new therapy works. Of course it is. So instead, we take a smaller group, we call that a sample, and we use what we learn from them to make a smart, statistical guess about the entire population. It's the bridge that lets us go from the specific to the general.
Now, this isn't some random, messy process. It's a structured journey. Think of it like a 5-step research compass, a reliable guide that makes sure we all follow the same logical path. That way, we don't get lost in the numbers.
And here's our compass laid out. First, we frame the debate. Then, we set our standard for what counts as real evidence. After that, we find our exact threshold, we go out and get the data, and then finally, we make the call. Let's break down each of these steps.
Step 1 is like setting up a scientific debate or a court case. On one side, you have the null hypothesis, or H0. This is the default skeptical position. It's the idea that nothing's going on, the therapy has no effect, it's just the status quo. On the other side is the alternative hypothesis, H1. This is usually what the researcher's hoping to find, that the therapy does have an effect. Our entire job is to see which of these two ideas the data supports.
Okay, step 2 is where we draw our line in the sand before we even start. We set what's called a level of significance, or alpha. This is just our rule for what we're going to consider very unlikely. We're asking, okay, if the therapy really does nothing, how weird would our results have to be for us to raise an eyebrow and say, I don't think this is just chance?
So where is that line in the sand? Well, in psychology, the gold standard for alpha is almost always 0.05. This means we're agreeing ahead of time that we're willing to take a 5% risk of being wrong. It's really just a convention, a balance between being so strict that we miss real effects and being so lenient that we start seeing patterns in random noise. If our result is something that would only happen by chance 5% of the time or less, we're going to conclude it's probably not chance.
Step 3 makes that 5% idea tangible. We find what's called a critical value. Based on that alpha level, we can calculate a very specific cutoff score. Just think of it like the goal line in a football game. If our data score crosses that line, we've got enough evidence to make a claim.
And step 4 is where the action is. This is where you actually run the experiment, give the therapy, hand out the surveys, whatever it is you're studying. You gather all your information from your sample, and then you boil it all down into one single number, your test statistic.
And finally, step 5, decision time. We take our test statistic and compare it to that critical value, our goal line. If our score crossed the line, we reject the null hypothesis and we get to say our finding is statistically significant. If it didn't cross the line, we fail to reject the null. Now, listen closely to that language. We never say we prove the null is true. All we can say is we didn't find enough evidence to throw it out. It's a really crucial distinction.
So you've got the 5 steps. Now there's one more decision you have to make, and it happens right at the beginning. You have to decide if you're looking for an effect in any direction or only in one specific direction.
This choice comes down to a one-tailed versus a two-tailed test. A one-tailed, or directional test, is what you use when you have a really strong reason to predict the direction. For instance, you predict a new therapy will specifically decrease anxiety. A two-tailed, or non-directional test, is more open-minded. You're predicting the therapy will change anxiety levels, but you're not sure if it'll go up or down. You're just looking for any kind of effect.
So when do you use which? Well, you should only really use a one-tailed test when past research and theory make a super strong case for a specific direction. But you got to be careful. If you predict a decrease in anxiety and you actually get a massive increase, a one-tailed test won't let you call that a significant finding. Because of that, a lot of researchers just play it safe and use a two-tailed test. It's a higher bar to clear, for sure, but if you get a significant result, your evidence is seen as more robust. Okay, we've been using this word significant a whole lot. Let's make sure we are absolutely crystal clear on what it means in statistics, because it's not the same as how you'd use it in a normal conversation.
This is it. This is the key. Statistically significant does not mean important. It doesn't mean large, and it doesn't mean meaningful in the real world. It has one and only one meaning. Our result was so unlikely to have happened by random chance that we're comfortable rejecting the no-effect idea. That's it. It's a statement about probability.
Here's how you'd see this in an actual research paper. That z equals -2.02 part, that's our test statistic. It tells us how far our finding was from the no-effect zone. And that little bit, p is less than 0.05, that's the money shot. It means the probability, the p-value, of getting this result just by luck was less than 5%. And because that's below our alpha of 0.05, we call it significant.
Now let's flip it around and look at this result. The report says p is greater than 0.05. That tells us everything. The probability of this happening by chance was more than 5%. It didn't cross our unlikely threshold, so we failed to reject the null hypothesis, and we have to conclude the effect was not significant.
So we have covered the entire journey, from asking the question all the way to interpreting the answer. The goal here isn't just to have you memorize steps, but to get you to start thinking like a researcher.
So what's the bottom line here? First, see this whole thing as your toolkit for making smart decisions with data. Second, really try to focus on the why behind each step, not just plugging numbers into formulas. And I promise, the logic becomes second nature with practice, especially once you start playing with free software like JASP or Jamovi to run these tests yourself. And that, right there, is the foundation of hypothesis testing. It is the engine that drives so much of what we know and what we're still discovering in psychology. As you go on in your studies, start looking at the world through this lens. This is the tool that lets you ask and then actually answer meaningful questions about why we do the things we do. So my final question for you is, what question will you test first?